Hey guys, so this is our war against NY718, New York Guardians. Long time, high-level alliance. We know they're not pushing as hard as they used to, but a lot of really good players with really big rosters, so we came into this pretty seriously. I know for this first fight, that Super Skrull is basically just Claire food. Like, he procs so many buffs. It's so easy to constantly have specials with her. This is Strikeback, so you can run into some problems, especially if you let some of those Furies stack and then end up blocking or, God forbid, eating one of his L2s. And then, of course, you don't want to trigger that falter. But on this node, as with most nodes, you can pretty easily play around that falter by just parrying and triggering it. Now, he does have 5 Furies here, but notice how even then, he just doesn't hit that hard into block. I took almost nothing on that parry. So she did trigger protection there, but I'm not really worried. I just don't find him that difficult to manage. And even there where we would push him to an L2, that's why I'm staying in poison mode this entire time. I could definitely finish the fight faster in Hellfire, but I wouldn't have as much control over it, and I'm not really at risk of timing out. So there where I just parried and did nothing, I thought I went for a light attack there. It didn't register. Because that failed, I just waited and tried to go for another parry. I didn't want to risk being late and getting parried myself. Still, fairly easy fight. So, I've talked before about how I consider Reed a really good counter for Doctor Doom. Apparently, I really wanted to prove that to you guys, because this is the worst opening I've had in a war fight in a very long time. Backed out to make sure my pre-fight stuck. I had to force quit on a fight earlier in the season, as some of you remember, when they didn't. But alright, I think I got that parry. I did not. Alright, I've taken 3 hits, little shaken. Okay. And I forget to never count on them not having high limber, right? But luckily, all those hits to the face gave me a bar of power and I was able to refresh my debuff, so he doesn't have his aura up right now, which would make it really hard to heavy him. I'm at half health. I know he has block penetration. I know this is going to hurt. I also know I'm not planning on taking any additional fights with Reed, so now that I feel like I'm not in imminent danger of dying, I'm starting to calm down a little bit. He is still at 80 though, so, we want to be careful. So I am running Max Despair. I am also running Maxed Petrify the Mastery. So notice how when we have him stunned, we were actually reversing his healing with those Careful Study debuffs. Now that they've turned into passives, he was still picking some up, but by then we got to the L2, thanks to the increased power gain from the Careful Study passive, allowing us to work around Power Alternator. And now, with 6 active debuffs, including 2 40% petrifies, we've completely turned willpower around, which is often one of the biggest issues in taking Doctor Doom with debuff-heavy champions. So notice how easily we got to yet another L2. We have all 3 stacked. Now I know that I wasn't really watching this guy's Mystic Dispersion. Notice how that evade saved me on that last hit there. But I know that even if I trigger it, he's going to lose power, right? So this time I'm going to do better than the last time I fought a Mystic here with Reed, and I'm going to make sure that I finish with that special 1 to get those extra 2 debuffs up, because that's the difference between having 7 charges going forward and 5. I do still really like fighting with Reed, but there are not a ton of nodes where he's the best answer, especially when I can bring Torch. And so I am going to be completely honest. The most important part about that first fight is getting as many pre-fights for the rest of the map as possible. Don't need one here though, because this is again Claire food. It's a very straightforward Mystic. Power Alternator can get you into some trouble. If you are not controlling his buffs and he suddenly gets an L2 when you're against the far wall, and then I guess if he has that Fury up and goes unblockable, That's a bad time. Right there, I proved how that could happen if I had been less in control of that fight. Because I definitely was not fully ready for him to have those 2 bars, right? I was just pushing to mine, but I'm being a little more careful now. I threw that L1 not because I like it, but to get around Power Alternator. And just in me talking about how to keep this fight safe, he's already down 2/3, right? As long as you play carefully, this is a very good matchup for Claire. Now, if I'd gotten hit by any of those specials and I didn't have those evades down, then this easily could have gone really, really poorly, but it didn't happen. So again, I'm in poison mode because I don't need to heal. His armor breaks are giving me willpower healing as long as I'm not getting hit for him to capitalize on them. And I don't need Hellfire mode because I'm not in any risk of timing out, right? A 90-second fight at this level against a rank 3 defender, plenty of damage. But I did want that control because I didn't really want to deal with any more L2 evades, as solid as I am on them. So notice how I'm backing out. I went a long time being pretty lucky on my pre-fights, but I've had too many fail recently. I'm not taking any chances. Back out, even though I saw it was there, now I'm really sure it'll be there. I've only died once to this fight, and it was when my pre-fight didn't work. Notice how I'm already almost at a bar and at a bar of power. That's because of Reed's synergy for the other Fantastic Four members, where they start with 60% of a bar of power. Well, they gain it over a few seconds. For a node like Encroaching Stun, where you want to make sure you have enough power, that is super helpful. We just went through the first Encroaching Stun timer, and he's already more than half down. He's also only at 5 charges, which means I'm realizing at this point I may not run into Wrath of Tanarak at all. Now, I probably could have thrown the L2 right there and ended it, but I didn't want to take that gamble. I know that's going to be enough time to get through Encroaching Stun, and it kills him. Like I said, probably could have thrown it earlier, but there's no point messing around on that node. When your opponents can crit, they tear through the extra armor you get, and it's often just an instant death. So now we have Mole Man, and you'll notice I don't have any mutants, and I don't have anyone who can, keep a stun or any other debuffs on him, because that's not my game plan. I find his specials pretty easy to bait out. He doesn't hit that hard into block. I'm not even going to worry about healing up Claire here. My game plan here is to go into Hellfire and rely on the direct damage there to cut through him. I'm throwing all of my medium combo enders to inflict these debuffs. He never actually goes into Frenzy, but my reasoning there was that I don't really care if he does, and I'd rather use my more natural combos. If he does go into Frenzy, then that just means that, some of my other debuffs will stick. Not really a problem. So look at how much damage that first L2 did. This is boosted, but Claire's direct damage on her L2 actually doesn't get affected by boosts or suicides, I believe. But Mole Man has some negative energy resistance, and so if you can land that against him, it does a lot of damage, in my opinion, against pretty much anybody, but it will really tear through him. You can see how slow this fight is outside of that L2, but, when you have 5 minutes and one of your specials cuts off roughly half of the opponent's health bar, not really anything you need to worry about, is there? So next up we have Stryfe. The biggest risk for Stryfe is if he goes invisible and then smacks you, or if you mess up one of those special evades and get that passive shock on you, because it hurts, especially without any willpower mitigating it. I'm using the debuff siphoner pre-fight here because I know that I don't have torches pre-fight, and so I would like those incinerates to do as much extra damage as they can. I also use suppression because that's a good default when I don't want to deal with too many enemy specials. Thinking back on it, I'm not sure I wanted suppression because I actually block his first few specials, and I appreciate the extra smolders because they let me keep my temperature up, and thus I don't have to worry about his invisibility. Also notice how helpful that rapid 60% of a bar of power I got from having Reed on my team, how helpful that was in getting that first bar of power and quickly refreshing the debuff siphoner nodes. You can also see how those extra 2 debuffs are helping us mitigate his healing. So I didn't go in after that one because I honestly forgot whether you could after blocking the projectile. I know you can if you dodge it, but at this point I just wanted more smolders to do more damage. I had forgotten that Stryfe actually has some block penetration in his base kit though, so I have definitely taken more damage than I was hoping to on that. There's an excellent chance that that's actually why he's here. Because, you know, very few nodes do you want to intercept the whole time, and he's just going to hurt through block. Especially because almost anyone you bring for him, you're probably going to end up using elsewhere, right? I was keeping a close eye on my temperature there because remember that if you fall below 10 temperature, you can miss again. So now we have Terrax on polka dot power again. I had practiced this a lot. My plan was poison mode exclusively because I was going to counter his heavies. It's a very small window, but was already charging that heavy as soon as I saw him go back, and so I have 6 poisons up and I'm gaining a good bit of power. The idea behind this is as it is elsewhere when I'm doing this particular matchup, I'm going for my L2 in Plague mode because I want that power steal because I want to be dealing with fewer specials against him. So I took a lot of damage from that first one because I got backed up. That's okay though, I have a lot of armor breaks on me, they're fairly long, I know I'm going to get some healing. He clearly is running Despair though, because you saw how low the willpower was when I had all of those armor breaks up at once. I'm countering his L1 with a heavy because the damage that early in the cycle really isn't much, and it helps me back him up, and therefore I'm going to be taking less when I'm in the corner, right? So far, so good. I have lost a bit more health, but I'm roughly where I was after he finished his opening cycle, and he's down significantly. That tells me I'm on pace for this. Even though I've triggered protection, I know I'm going to get a chance to intercept him. That's just kind of how Terrax works. I don't worry about it. Getting my debuffs, I want more power, right? I get to that second bar. I wait for the rock field to expire, I throw the L2. Now, honestly, what I should have done is I should have tried to intercept him, get that protection off, given him a bit of power, and then thrown the L2, because she steals more when he has more, kind of like Doom, but I didn't. That one, I was just slow. No excuse, I was a little slow on the heavy, and he clearly has points in Stand Your Ground. I've played with Wongse before in an alliance, I am not surprised, and it hurt, right? So when that happened, notice I switched modes here because I'm going, okay, I want to get some healing in. I do not like playing this low. But you're going to see something come up here. We have some smart plugs in our apartment, and in a few seconds here, I'm going to get surprised by one of them going off without me expecting it, and I'm going to lose my light source. I think it's right about here, because yeah, rather than counter with the heavy, I go in and actually attack, and I can tell I'm off my game. This was not the plan. I'm backed up, he still has power. I was really flustered by the change in my surroundings. I should have saved it. I should not have been as flustered. but I was, and I gave one up. I cleaned it up with Claire pretty easily, but you don't need to see that. So going into Mysterio here, I think this is a pretty good placement for him. A lot of his best counters, of course, do benefit from the White Magneto pre-fight, but then you need to bring a White Magneto. I've taken this before, and as I said then, I think the best way to do this is to block at least the first L2, so that you get some smolders up. That failed light, I underestimated the pushback on the White Magneto pre-fight and thought that just a light would connect. I was clearly wrong, so I took some brute force damage for my troubles. But with 3 smolders, I'm pretty confident that I'm going to stay above 10 temperature the entire time that he's in this particular mode. I am heavying though because that helps keep up my temperature. I was trying to push him to another special too. That's okay. I take some brute force here. I learned my lesson and used a medium to be sure I connect instead of a light. I did take some reflected damage, but not a lot. Yeah, so he throws another. That's definitely why I think Mysterio's good here, because the combination of his reflection gas, which kind of tells you don't hit him, with brute force means you're guaranteed to take some damage, especially when you combine it with the fact that he also has block penetration in his base kit. But even though this was not fun, and I took more damage than I wanted, see, I actually thought that that Incinerate would have killed him. I was clearly wrong, so I take a risk here, hit him once. I knew I could have blocked if that was wrong. Then I could have blocked one more time, charged a heavy, and I still would have ended it. But I wanted to be done sooner. Anyway, with that fight, it's a good placement. Even a rank 3 torch takes a lot of damage, but there are ways to mitigate it. Highly recommend having the White Magneto pre-fight for those guaranteed openings, both for just getting brute force off you and for charging heavies so that you can safely keep your temperature up. I still think Torch is probably the best counter because he relies on damage over time, and he can avoid missing, so that kind of gets around Mysterio's 2 biggest issues. We could tell by this point that NY was definitely not playing to win against us, so this one was fairly casual, but my battle group really delivered. That death that I had to Terrax was actually the only one. We haven't gotten that donut yet, which makes me feel worse about that, but I think that was our 4th 164 out of 165 attack bonuses this season. So I'm really enjoying the groove we have with this group. They're doing great. See you guys next time.